Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. President Trump announces 30-day pause on the tariffs that were to begin today. Plus, despite the reprieve, two distinct tariff threats remain on the horizon. Political columnist Brian Lilly explains. And Hamas officials begin talks over the second phase of the ceasefire deal with Israel.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Swedish police say at least 10 people have been killed in a shooting at an adult education center west of Stockholm. Police say the crime scene is so extensive that investigators haven't been able to confirm a final death toll or determine a conclusive number of wounded. But authorities say the suspected gunman is among those killed and that he acted alone. Identities have not been released. Hamas officials have begun talks with international mediators over the second phase of the ceasefire deal with Israel. The next phase is expected to include further hostage releases and Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Israel has said it won't agree to a complete withdrawal until Hamas's military and political capabilities are eliminated, while the terrorist group says it won't hand over the last hostages until all Israeli troops are removed from the territory. Hamas is also claiming that Israel hasn't abided by some of the terms of the first phase, saying Israel's government has delayed and obstructed the flow of aid. The continental trade war that economists warned would raise prices is now on hold. Damaging tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods were to take effect today until U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 30-day pause. Meantime, federal opposition parties are also calling for Parliament's return within the next month to act on Trump's tariff threat. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau presented Trump with the federal government's $1.3 billion plan to secure the border and tackle drug trafficking on Monday. Robert Gillies with the Associated Press explains.
And they made progress on negotiating a deal where Canada would do more at the U.S.-Canadian border to prevent drugs from going into the United States, even though drugs don't really go from Canada to the United States, certainly in compared to what happens at the Mexican border with fentanyl. Canadians are furious. They're upset. They are not buying American goods all of a sudden. They're looking to see on the label where things are made. They're booing the American national anthem at sporting events in Canada, NHL games, NBA games. Canadians feel like the relationship with the United States is now broken, that after centuries of close ties and family ties, they feel betrayed. I think Canada will certainly have to deal with this tariff threat for some time. It's only been averted for at least 30 days.
Trudeau took to Facebook today saying that Canada is deploying thousands more frontline personnel to the border, launching a precursor chemical detection unit, and building a new drug profiling center to combat the fentanyl trade. He says, quote, "This drug trade is a global deadly issue, and Canada is tackling it head on," end quote. Meanwhile, Trudeau has prorogued Parliament and it's not scheduled to sit again until March 24th. The pause of Parliament is meant to allow the federal Liberal Party to choose its next leader on March the 9th. And according to Toronto Sun columnist and BCN contributor Brian Lilly, Howard Lutnick, President Trump's pick for U.S. Commerce Secretary, has warned that there are another batch of tariffs coming that will be sectoral.
You know, that's one that probably oil will not be part of, energy will not be part of, but maybe Canadian beef is going to be on the list, maybe auto parts. These are things that, other things that we trade on a large scale with the Americans, and they might just say, yeah, we don't want that. Or, I mean, the big concern if you're a beef rancher in Alberta or pork producer in Quebec is country of origin labeling, which is a non-tariff barrier. So there's a lot of uncertainty going forward.
Lilly also shares his thoughts on Mark Carney's carbon border adjustment plan and its impact on Canadian consumers. All that and more coming up later on in the program. Quebec Premier François Legault welcomed the news that Canada would not be hit with the United States tariff for another month, but he adds that the uncertainty continues to hang over the economy regardless, and Quebec companies are feeling the impact of those potential 25% tariffs.
We need to have diversification of markets. So it includes working better with other provinces, but also with Europe, with other countries than U.S. We have 71% of our exportation going to U.S. It's a lot too much. And we have also to increase our productivity, because right now my big fear is when you compare Canada to United States, there's something like 30% of difference for the productivity. So we really need to work, all of us in Canada, on our productivity.
On Tuesday, Alberta Minister Jason Nixon announced the government will initiate a new program in order to empower Albertans with disabilities to be able to seek employment opportunities. The Alberta Disability Assistance Program, or ADAP, will fully launch in 2026 and will allow people with programs such as AISH to individually qualify for work while still receiving their monthly AISH payments alongside.
Many Albertans on AISH want to work, but are afraid of losing the benefits they need or getting lack of access to the resources that they need to get back into the workforce. We know that persons with disabilities face higher daily costs related to their health, and that the fear of losing health benefits discourages them from seeking employment and creates a barrier for greater independence. That's why I'm incredibly excited to announce that by July 2026, we will be launching a full new benefit program for people with disabilities in our province. The new Alberta Disability Assistance Program, or ADAP, has been thoughtfully designed based on input from Albertans with disabilities to address a gap in support for individuals with disabilities who are able to work and want to enjoy the benefits that come with employment.
Now, off the heels of Nixon's announcement, the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees braved the freezing weather to hold an information picket here in Lethbridge today. Union members protested outside the provincial building for what they say are government cuts to disability services and indefinite wait times for critical services to families with disabled children.
Several advocacy groups had their funding cut, as well as jobs. Temporary jobs have been cut within the government of Alberta, while the wait list of families with children with disabilities is tops over 12,000. We have spoken to Alberta citizens, and there are Albertans who have been waiting for over 5 years to have their child's needs assessed, and this just won't do. The response to this is, hey, let's end temporary contract workers, and we know that's not going to make a dent in this. We also find that our permanent workers are having their caseloads go sky high, so something's got to give, and we're asking Minister Nixon to rethink this decision and to instead put more funding into disability services and get more boots on the ground, more jobs.
The vice president of the AUPE Local 006 did welcome Nixon's ADAP announcement, saying that it's good to see more funding for Albertans with disabilities in some way. Former Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman has been a known outspoken activist against the Grassy Mountain coal mining project. Spearman announced his formal launch of his petition to the Alberta government that has now accumulated over 3,300 signatures in 2 weeks, surpassing his goal of 2,000 signatures. Well, the project has been divisive across southern Alberta, with Crow's Nest Pass residents voting to support the project, while residents east of the mountains share concerns that it would contaminate water sources, including the Old Man River. The Alberta Energy Regulator is due for a decision to vote in favor or against the project spearheaded by Northback Holdings. Lethbridge police have arrested 5 people for identity fraud and forging documents. Authorities initiated an investigation in the fall of 2023 and seized hundreds of forged documents and equipment for manufacturing IDs at a North Side home. Many of the IDs belonged to identity theft victims from various provinces. The investigation determined the arrested subjects fraudulently opened bank accounts, credit cards, and loans using the victims' names at various banks throughout the province. province. Some of the suspects also obtained high-end vehicles like Land Rovers and Mercedes-Benzes with falsified VINs. During the investigation, additional crimes in other jurisdictions were also identified, including defrauding victims in Ontario as part of a grand apparent scam. Here are the names of the subjects, ranging in ages from 18 to 27. They all face charges and remain before the court at various stages of their proceedings. Lethbridge police say they are anticipating a great turnout for this weekend's annual Polar Plunge in support of the Special Olympics. The event will take place Saturday morning at Henderson Lake Park, where at least 80 people have registered to participate, according to Constable Braylon Higgin. This will be the 14th year that LPS has hosted the event in partnership with Law Enforcement Torch Run.
So this is our provincial-wide campaign, is one of our biggest events that we host every year. So here in Lethbridge, we're hoping to raise $20,000 is our goal, and especially for this time of year. So this year we have a lot of events going on. We have the World Games, which will be in Italy. We have a figure skater from Coaldale heading there, and we will be having the Summer Games in Grand Prairie for the provincial games this year. So we'll have a lot of athletes going up there. So it's a great year to donate to this special cause.
As of Tuesday, $12,000 of the $20,000 goal have been raised in our city, and registration for the plunge is open until 10 a.m. on Saturday once the event is underway. Every February, Black History Month invites us to reflect on and celebrate the vital contributions of the Black community throughout history. Lethbridge Polytechnic kicked off Black History Month to recognize their achievements, resilience, and continue to promote equality and respect. Markham Johnson, Services Specialist at Lethbridge Polytechnic, explains what Black History Month represents for his community.
Many years ago, I thought Black History Month was it wasn't a waste of time, but just not important enough that we should have a month for it. But as I got older, I've realized in terms of culture and people and what we need to share with each other. And so the Polytechnic helps with that. This very event today and this month speaks to that. And so I am very grateful to the Polytechnic that they speak to not just the people here at the Polytechnic as staff and as students, but also the community as well. The importance for me is that we get to teach each other. So it is very, very important to remember to keep it alive, to keep Black history alive. I said in a speech earlier that it's not just Black History Month, but it should be a Black History movement, because it can't just stop for the month of February, right? We have to continue that.
And I feel proud to be a Black student. I never thought of my color being a Black back home. I think the first time I recognized I was Black was the day I landed in Canada. That was my first international travel. So while at the airport, I was like, wow, I am Black, you know.
In December 1995, the House of Commons officially recognized February as Black History Month in Canada. Well, today, the world recognized Cancer Day. In southern Alberta, researchers at the University of Lethbridge are exploring the potential of local plants to fight cancer. And the innovation has captured the attention of many for its promising possibilities. Heidi Echevarria has the story.
And the important part of what we're doing is we're trying to find new chemicals, new natural products that can become medicines, but we're also trying to train young adults to lead this work into the next generation, in fact. We need to find better ways, safer ways to help people who suffer from it.
While many have experienced positive results with conventional treatments, some have lost faith in them. Meanwhile, research into natural alternatives that can stop the growth of cancer cells is advancing rapidly. Amidst these debates about the effectiveness of treatments, there is a good news. With the seal of Lethbridge, southern Alberta is proud of the advances made in studies that explore the potential of the plants that grow in its prairies. A team of researchers, led by Dr. Roy Goldstein, biology professor and cancer researcher at the University of Lethbridge, shared their important discoveries in the fight against cancer.
We've just recently learned that the area where Lethbridge is found, southern Alberta, that runs across Canada, the plants here are in fact special. And there's a few areas like that in the world, but not so many. It's so important for us and for the university to do this work here. We're the ones who know these plants best. Unfortunately, I know too many people, either the person directly or the families, have suffered from cancer. It's true, it remains, there are some terrible diseases out there, and cancer remains one of the big ones. And the natural products that come from plants historically, some of the best anti-cancer medicines actually come from plants. So there's one that's from Canada, it's called Taxol. Some people may be familiar with it. And what we're doing is we're sort of following that path, which was done elsewhere in the world. And now we realize that the plants from this area may contribute to that. People are suffering. We need to come up with answers from any source. We've investigated nearly 200 from this area. We find that many of them are interesting, and approximately 6 of them we've really focused on quite hard. That's where we direct almost all of our attention.
Whenever we bring a plant into the lab, we do what's called an unbiased assay, where we make a plant extract and then we test it on the cancer cells. And any effect that we see tells us what the plant might do. So that could be a range of activities from antioxidant, anti-aging, antimitotic, or anti-cancer, and we really let the plant tell us what it can offer us in terms of human health.
When we go out, we need to collect our plants, meaning that we need to find the plants and we need to be able to harvest them sustainably. So we need to find large enough quantities that we're not disturbing natural environments and ecosystems. And then we need to also make sure we're collecting plants during their flowering or growing period. We really do the fundamental research that can build towards larger projects in drug discovery. So by investigating these understudied plant species, we can discover new compounds or perhaps new targets in human cancer cells.
The fundamentals into looking for the wellness and health and cancer wellness medicine. We're able to further develop good medicines.
The World Cancer Day is really important because one day a year, even though everyone's busy, we focus, we say, okay, where are we now and where would we like to go? And some of the big changes that have been coming up over the last few years really are the changes in technology. So it's now become possible to really move these projects much faster and much bigger.
Advances in the study of cancer-fighting plants in Lethbridge open up new possibilities for cancer treatment and offer hope for the future of medicine. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Well, the cold weather we're experiencing in Lethbridge is proving to be taxing on some of the resources available to our city's homeless population. BCN's Naveen Day visited the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen and has the details.
Many of Lethbridge's less fortunate are braving the cold to attend to the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen to take in a hot meal and warm their fingers and toes. According to the Soup Kitchen's executive director, however, the time they need to warm up exceeds the resources that his organization has to offer.
We're seeing upwards of 150, 175 people per meal, 3 times a day. For us, that is not a challenge, except that we know when they come in from the minus 23, they would love to stay, but we can't have them stay longer than the hour. So that hits us as well, because our volunteers only have so much time. And so we can't say, well, you could just stay. Our dream is that there would be a daytime warming center, somewhere where people could go.
While it doesn't always boil down to dollars and cents, Bill Ginther says there are many ways to help our cities less fortunate in both small ways and big ways.
These are people that are struggling with issues that we don't even understand. We're not from the same upbringing. We've had good quality homes, most of us. These people don't have that. And so I think showing more compassion. The other thing is when you're out and about, have some gloves with you. I don't know the last time I've kept a pair of gloves, because I see somebody walking outside now they will freeze their fingers. Amputations every winter. So I say to people, you can do something. You know, small thing, come to volunteer, big thing. Have gloves with you, hand them out like I did last night. We ran out of gloves, I give people socks, put them on your hand.
The cold weather snap is expected to last until the weekend, with a short reprieve on Saturday, then back to those chilly cold temperatures. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Thank you, Naveen. And as Naveen just mentioned there, the frigid temperatures will be sticking around for a bit more, unfortunately. After the break, I'll be back with a full look at the weather forecast. Well, southern Alberta remains in a deep freeze for at least the next couple of days. What do you think? You think we can hang on until Thursday? Because that's when we'll be a little bit warmer. That minus 11 will feel quite a bit warmer than this crazy minus 23, minus 22 that we have over the next couple of days here with risk of frostbite going into this evening and lasting until Wednesday, putting those wind chill factors into the minus 30s. Not very nice. Also another 2 to 4 centimeters of snow expected this evening, 2 more centimeters expected on Wednesday, and then minus 11 for the high on Thursday, and then we're going back to minus 14 on Friday, then climbing up again on Saturday, minus 7 with clear skies. And then look at that, Monday and Tuesday we're back, or sorry, Sunday and Monday rather, we are back in the minus 16 and minus 12 range. Could see some flurries on Sunday, but the average high for this time of year is 0. Average low, minus 12. So we're gonna be kind of in and out of that over the next several days, mostly out of it though, mostly colder than the average cold for this time of year. Record high on this day was 15 degrees happening back in 1941. Record low was in 1947 and it was minus 35. The sun rose this morning right at 8 a.m. on the nose. Sun set this afternoon rather at 5:32. So we're looking at 9 hours, 32 minutes of daylight exactly. Okay, on the West Coast, we are seeing some flurries. So 60% chance in Victoria, high 0, 30% in Vancouver, minus 1 for the high there. Minus 19 in Edmonton tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Calgary could see some clear skies and minus 21. We're seeing more precipitation, more snow in the rest of the prairies. Also risk of frostbites in all of those cities. So Edmonton, Calgary, Saskatoon, Regina, Winnipeg. That means that wind chill factors are going into the minus 30s. So risk of frostbite, minus 18 for the high in Saskatoon, 5 centimeters of snow, 10 to 15 centimeters expected in Regina. Lots of snow there. Minus 17 for the high and minus 13 in Winnipeg with 5 centimeters of snow. Now, as we look to the rest of the country here in the central portion, we're not seeing quite as much precipitation as we saw in those prairies there. So minus 5 for Toronto, minus 9 in Ottawa, minus 11 in Montreal, clear skies in both of those cities. Looking over to Atlantic Canada now, Fredericton sitting at a high of minus 13 tomorrow, but clear skies, so there you go. Minus 8 in Halifax, minus 13 Charlottetown, and St. John's also looking at some snow, 2 to 4 centimeters of snow and blowing snow with 30 to 50 kilometer per hour winds, minus 6 for the high there. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Even as Canada gained an 11th hour reprieve from U.S. plans to impose punishing tariffs on our goods, the loonie dipped to its lowest level in more than 20 years earlier in the day. The Bank of Canada's end-of-day exchange rate yesterday had the loonie trading at 68.48 cents U.S. The dollar rebounded to 70 cents in the minutes after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the planned tariffs would be paused for at least 30 days. Now, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce says U.S. President Donald Trump has put Canadian businesses, workers, and families in the lurch by delaying but not canceling his tariff plans. Chamber Chief Executive Candice Lang says the delay only gives Canadian businesses and governments more time to drive home the point that the tariffs make no sense. The 30-day pause comes after 2 phone calls between Trump and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Trudeau said Canada would be implementing a $1.3 billion border plan, which includes bringing in new helicopter patrols and commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. The auto sector has dodged U.S. tariffs too, but the Auto Workers Union says threats to the sector and the economy remain. Unifor National President Lana Payne said that yesterday's last-minute reprieve just means a continued overhang of uncertainty. She says Canada has lost out on investment and seen other decisions delayed since U.S. President Donald Trump said in November that he planned to impose tariffs. Payne is calling for building a more resilient Canadian economy to create a bigger buffer from U.S. volatility. Truckers say threatened U.S. tariffs would wreak havoc on their industry as trade between Canada and the United States takes a hit. The head of Canadian Trucking Alliance says the fallout could be fatal for carriers that are already struggling because of weaker consumer demand. The alliance is calling on premiers to open up interprovincial trade and is asking the federal government to reconvene Parliament to deal with the crisis. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 37 points on the day to finish at 25,279. The Dow was up 134 points to 44,566. The S&P 500 was up 43 on the day to 6037, and the Nasdaq was up 262 points to finish at 19,654. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 45 cents to 72.71 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to 3.22 US. Gold was up 28.15 to 28.4193 US an ounce, and silver was up 62 cents to 32.12 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel. Barley is at $6.64. Canola is at $14.70, and corn is at $8.64 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.10 to $201.88. Feeder cattle March contract was down $2.25 to $268.25. Lean hogs were up 75 cents to 85.07, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours at 69.80 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Swedish police say at least 10 people have been killed in a shootout at an adult education center west of Stockholm. Police say the crime scene is so extensive that investigators haven't been able to confirm a final death toll or determine a conclusive number of wounded. But authorities say the suspected gunman is among those killed and that he acted alone. Identities have not been released. Coming up after the break, Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly gives us more details on the delay of U.S. tariffs on Canada and also Carney's plan for the carbon tax. And when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. So the tariffs are held off for at least 30 days, but this uncertainty is still causing problems for the Canadian business climate. Here to discuss this in more detail is Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly. Brian, welcome. So what says you about all this uncertainty in our Canadian-owned businesses?
This is the worst part of all of this. So yeah, we've got a reprieve for at least 30 days, it says, so it could go longer. That still causes problems for companies that are trying to make decisions about where to place investments. I haven't heard of any investments canceled yet, but speaking to people across various industries, there are some on hold where people were going to maybe do an expansion or decide to, okay, we'll locate a plant here. Those are on hold while all of this is figured out. And I don't think that's going to change with this reprieve because, well, 30 days from now, he could come back and say, you know what? You haven't done enough. I'm going to put the tariffs in. And then beyond that, let's say that the federal government, whether it's under Justin Trudeau or whoever, is able to convince Trump that we're doing enough on the border. And he says, okay, you're not getting the 25% tariffs. Howard Lutnick, who is Trump's pick for Commerce Secretary, said before the Senate Commerce Committee last week that there are another batch of tariffs coming that will be sectoral. And so, that's one that probably oil will not be part of, energy will not be part of, but maybe Canadian beef is going to be on the list, maybe auto parts. These are things that, other things that we trade on a large scale with the Americans, and they might just say, yeah, we don't want that. Or, the big concern if you're a beef rancher in Alberta or pork producer in Quebec is country of origin labeling, which is a non-tariff barrier. So there's a lot of uncertainty going forward, and that puts the entire business climate in this country into question. Kind of what Donald Trump wants, though. He wants people to make the decision to build their business, to produce products in the United States, not have them in Canada and ship them down.
Yeah. It's just been such a volatile time, especially to be in the news. Even late last week, we were hearing, February 1st might be pushed back to March 1st. And then it was like, nope, that's not true. And then all of a sudden it was Tuesday and then yesterday. So all this last minute stuff. So how did this particular last minute reprieve come about, Brian?
So my understanding from speaking to people who do know is that Prime Minister Trudeau went onto the call with President Trump in the morning, just expecting that he was going to be told, you're getting slapped with tariffs, they're going ahead as planned. Remember, Trudeau said he was questioned by a journalist, have you talked to Donald Trump about this? That was on Saturday night when he came out in response to Trump's announcement. And he admitted that he had not spoken to Donald Trump since the inauguration. That's not a good sign. Canadian Prime Minister should be able to get the American president on the phone pretty much any day of the week. We're supposed to have that tight of a relationship. Trudeau had obviously been trying, and Trump wasn't taking or returning his calls. So on Monday morning, they have a call. Trump starts saying, you have not done anything on the border. And Trudeau replies with, but we've briefed your people on our plan, the one that was released December 17th. They've spoken about it publicly. They agree to have another call. Trump had made it clear that Canada hadn't done enough. And so the Prime Minister and his team spent the rest of the day discussing with Trump and his team what needed to be done, and ended up coming up with the idea of a fentanyl czar. They quantified how many people, 10,000 people on the front lines. We still don't quite know what that is, but that's there. Another $200 million in spending, which of course has to be passed by Parliament, which isn't sitting. But he added enough to the package that Trump was willing to say, okay, you'll get the reprieve. Will it be enough going down the road? We don't know, but it got us the same 30-day reprieve that Mexico got.
Oh, so interesting. And I mean, here we have Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, who's been calling for a border czar, well, since last week, really. And instead, the government offers up a fentanyl czar at the last minute to get this reprieve, right? So a lot of people are saying that she's been really smart about this in her thinking from beginning. So what do you think, Brian? Does that show that Smith was right?
I think it does. And look, she was able to get energy down to 10%. If the tariffs had gone ahead, which of course they haven't, but everything else was going to get 25% energy. And I believe that did include electricity from Ontario and Quebec and British Columbia. That was only going to get 10%. So she did a lot of lobbying on that. And she came up with ideas like the border czar. That's essentially what the fentanyl czar is going to be doing, actually probably a bit more, because the fentanyl czar will be able to go in and deal with money laundering, which is a major issue. And Premier Smith has told me that fentanyl is a problem in Alberta, in British Columbia, and going across the border. So she has been very smart on this all along, despite being called a traitor and worse by some people in the Canadian media, the Eastern Canadian media establishment, being accused of standing with Donald Trump by Justin Trudeau. Not a very Team Canada approach from the guy who should be the captain of Team Canada, but isn't right now.
Oh, so interesting. Now, you mentioned earlier there, and you've also been writing that there are two distinct tariff threats on the horizon. And you mentioned the beef could be. So can you maybe get into that a little bit more, unpack that more, or what else we should be sort of aware of or wary of?
Yeah, so even if we get past this 25% tariff, there will be sector by sector tariffs coming down the road. This is the report that Trump has asked for by April 1st. A lot of dates, and that just adds to the uncertainty that we were talking about earlier. So look, the Americans want to use tariffs to realign global trade. This is the reason behind it. I know I keep hearing a lot of commentary that nobody knows why he wants to do this. They've been quite upfront. They've spoken openly about it. There are papers written about it. They don't believe that global trade is balanced in favor of the United States anymore. And so, China got its 10% across the board, but they want to look at other aspects of trade with countries like Canada and Mexico and say, is this proceeding properly? Is it happening according to our trade agreements? Are there problems? And if so, if they do find problems, they will most likely try to, balance that out, in their view, by using tariffs. So we have to be wary of that, and we have to be cognizant of that. We also have to be mindful of the trade irritants between the two countries. I keep comparing this to a marriage, and we're effectively married to the United States, and they are coming to us with problems. We have problems with them. Well, just like in a marriage, if you want it to last, you've got to be listening to your partner's problems. We got to be listening to theirs and then trying to find a way to have a win-win. And far too often, we've just been saying, no, there's no problem. Be quiet, ignore it. Well, in a marriage, that doesn't work too well. In a trading relationship, it won't work too well either. Trump is going to be looking to renegotiate USMCA or Kuzma, whatever you want to call it. Is going to want to renegotiate that early. It's up for review in 2026. He's going to want to do it now. And if you look at his social media posts, he's already got his sights on things like banking, which he says Americans are treated unfairly by Canada on.
Interesting. I know this might not be your area of expertise, but you mentioned that Canada's got the same reprieve now that Mexico does. Do you know what Mexico has done at the southern border?
The big thing they offered was 10,000 troops, and that they're going to work harder with the Americans to try and stem the flow of people and drugs. We've got our problems with those issues on the northern border. They're much, much bigger on the southern border that the United States has with Mexico. So President Sheinbaum said, yes, we will do this. She had not even announced retaliatory tariffs, is my understanding. She was waiting, putting forward her plan, and was able to get an off-ramp or get a reprieve before we were. Not dissimilar from when Mexico was able to negotiate a new trade deal before Canada was, because we ended up being frozen out by the Americans because they didn't like the way we were negotiating. It's always, you never know what's going to happen with a character like Donald Trump, but you also have to be very careful about what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're conducting yourself, so that you don't end up on the wrong end of his wrath.
No, isn't that for sure? Now, Brian, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Rae, was on Fox News last night, and not only could he not say the word oil, but he also said he stood by a 2017 op-ed that he wrote that was highly critical of Donald Trump. Now, does this show that, it might show that liberals don't know how to talk to right-wing America or Trump's America? I mean, I'd say he's definitely not speaking to the right audience on Fox with those talking points.
Well, look, when Prime Minister Trudeau went on American media, went to CNN, he talked to Jake Tapper. Yeah. Jake Tapper is a good journalist, but he's not well liked or respected by, the Trump team. Yeah. Trudeau also spoke to Jen Psaki, who was formerly Biden's press secretary and is now with NBC. Mm-hmm. Those were the wrong people for him to speak to. Bob Rae is the first time I can think of seeing a liberal government official going on. Bob Rae, of course, used to be interim leader of the Liberal Party federally. It's the first time I've seen him going on Fox News. And when he was talking about the trade embargo, he should have been saying oil. Our trade imbalance is due to oil because you buy so much cheap oil from us. We sell it at a discount to you because we can't sell it anywhere else. John Baird, Stephen Harper's former foreign affairs minister, made those points on Fox yesterday, but Bob Rae couldn't. He talked about international rules-based order, which, quite frankly, the Trump team doesn't care about. So they really don't know how to talk to Trump's America. Danielle Smith and Doug Ford have been doing all the work on Fox, and you've got Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney and others going on CNN. Look, you got to speak to the audience that matters, not to your friends.
Yeah, no, funny. Meanwhile, conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has said that going forward, we need to reimagine our economy. So what does he envision, Brian?
Pipelines, expanding the natural resources sector, whether it's mining, oil, gas, potash. He wants to unleash the Canadian economy. Donald Trump is about to unleash the American economy. He's going to deregulate in a big way. And that, I think I said this to you last week, that is as big a threat to Canada and our economic future going forward as the tariffs are. If he deregulates in the way that he's talking about, lowers taxes in the way he's talking about, and we stay on our current path, that's going to be bad news. So Pierre Poilievre's talking about fast-tracking pipeline construction and permits, the same with LNG export terminals, having an east-west pipeline again. He's not necessarily saying Energy East, because who knows if TransCanada, or TC Energy as they're now called, wants to bring that back. So he's talking about doing all the things that are the antithesis of what the Liberals have been doing for the last while. But if we want to wean ourselves off the Americans and diversify trade, that's part of it. Oh, and by the way, he wants to tear down interprovincial trade barriers, such as differences in when trucks can move goods and what kind of first aid gear they have to have on them. All these little things that provinces have put into place as their own protectionist measures. Several people have been pointing out since all of this started, it's sometimes easier to trade with Belgium or the United States than it is between provinces.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Meanwhile, Liberals have that leadership race going on, and it looks like Mark Carney is their front runner. And he's promising to scrap one carbon tax, but replace it with something worse. So, Brian, what is a carbon border adjustment? What is this?
The carbon border adjustment, it's essentially a tariff on any imported good that comes from a country that doesn't have a climate plan Mark Carney likes. I thought we were supposed to be against tariffs. I thought we were trying to fight Donald Trump's tariffs. And here's Carney saying he'll bring this in. The United States is their biggest trading partner. That's not going to change no matter how much we diversify. They do not have a carbon tax. They did not have one under Biden, under Trump the first time, or under Obama. They do not have one. So they're going to face, if Mark Carney gets elected and follows through, we're going to be putting a tax on every imported good from the United States. What's that going to do? It'll make life more expensive. He also proposed that he would severely hike the industrial carbon tax. So he'll get rid of it for you and I, but he's going to, all those big polluters, they're going to pay big time now, though. And he was asked in an interview with CTV Atlantic, maybe you saw this clip, it was floating around a lot. Todd Battis said, well, wait a minute. Won't that drive up prices for consumers? It'll trickle down. He said, oh, no, won't. You don't buy much steel these days anyway. This guy's supposed to be the smart economist in the room. And that was a really dumb thing to say. On the one hand, Carney's arguing against Trump's tariff, saying it will drive inflation. And on the other hand, he's saying his two new carbon taxes will be just fine for the economy. It is utterly ridiculous.
Looks like we're out of time here, but Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for stopping by today. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Heart disease is the second leading cause of death in Canada. But did you know that if you live in southern Alberta, your risk of dying from heart disease is even higher? Going to talk about that and more with today's guest, who joins us from right here in Lethbridge. Dr. Saye Zielke is a cardiologist and author. She is the physician lead for cardiac sciences in the AHS South Zone, the chair for the Southern Alberta Cardiac Sciences Advisory Cabinet, and is a member of the University of Lethbridge Board of Governors. And she is the medical doctor or director of Chinook Cardiology and of the Heart Function Clinic and Cardiac Rehabilitation Program, both part of the Alberta Healthy Living Program of Alberta Health Services. Now, don't ask me to repeat that. That was a mouthful. Great to have you with us, Dr. Zielke.
Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Oh, looking forward to the conversation here today. Now, I understand that residents of Southern Alberta are roughly 30% more likely to die from cardiac-related disease. Now, is this at least in part because we don't have a cardiac catheterization laboratory here?
It's an excellent question. It's likely multifactorial. I mentioned, and to be exact, the relative risk of death is 26.6% higher from cardiovascular disease here in southern Alberta compared to the rest of the province, and that's just not okay. And we have never studied the reasons, but we have some thoughts and hypotheses as to why that may be. We do know that our risk factor profile in the population is about 15% higher compared to the rest of the province. Sadly, our population is less healthy, so that surely contributes to it. We do not have access to the recommended number of cardiologists. Um, and we also have studies that show that the more access to cardiology, the better the outcomes. So that likely contributes to it. And of course, as you mentioned, we do not have access to some of the diagnostic and therapeutic modalities, such as a coronary angiogram, which are now considered standard of care in cardiology.
Right. So we're missing some key components here, and that's all contributing toward that higher risk here in southern Alberta. So, I mean, how many people does this impact every year? I understand it's like more than 1,000. Is that correct?
About just over 1,300 patients are expected or are required to make the trip to Calgary to the coronary angiography suite cath lab in Calgary.
And some maybe even aren't healthy enough to make the journey, and you're kind of stuck, right? So, yeah. Now you've made this your mission, haven't you? I mean, you recently got the keys to the city given to you, and well deserved. So kudos to you there. But you really want to get a cardiac cath lab for southern Alberta. This is important, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I'm humbled by the support of my community, but ultimately, I'm driven by one thing, and that is my patients and my patient care. I cannot emphasize to you how difficult it is when we have a patient that is too sick to airlift to Calgary. You have to sit at the bedside in the ICU, and the frustration of knowing that if you're in Calgary, you'd be rolling them down the hall to get them the help that they need, but sometimes they're just too sick to airlift. That's just devastating. It's devastating for the patients, of course, their family, the team that's taking care of them, and some patients have very large number of difficulties commuting to Calgary to access some of the services. Even the patients who are not admitted, who are home but need to make the trip to Calgary. Some are older in our field. Some have no access, no transportation, no way of really getting there. We do try our best not to leave anyone behind and kind of find volunteers to get them to Calgary, but still, it's a big deal. Having care closer to home matters.
Yeah, they're not just numbers, right? I mean, we're talking, 1,300 people. Well, it's a stat, but each one of those, is a mom, a dad, a grandfather, whatever, a loved one, and they matter. So, I mean, what kinds of crucial procedures does a cath lab actually do? I mean, again, for just somebody watching, I mean, I don't know, what do they do?
Person. So a coronary angiography suite does two things: diagnostics, and also can be used to provide therapy, so therapeutics. So basically, a cath lab or a coronary angiogram, a cardiac catheterization, is allows us to see the coronary arteries better and allows us to measure pressure inside the heart and understand the flows across the valves in the heart, as well as measure pressures in the lungs. So the way that it happens is that typically we freeze the skin in the wrist or on top of the leg, with similar to what a dentist uses to freeze your gums, and pass a small tube or a catheter, we call it, through the artery. We go all the way to the heart, engage the artery in the heart, shoot some dye that lights up under X-ray, and with X-ray machines take a picture or a video of the dye passing through the arteries. Now, if the arteries are narrowed, we will see that because there's dye going through. And also we can, with the wires and catheters we have inside the heart, we can measure flow to understand what is happening with the valves and what are the pressures inside the heart and the lungs. If there are narrowings in the arteries of the heart, then we can open those arteries with a stent and with a balloon. So dilate the artery and put a stent as a scaffolding to keep that artery open. That is what we do with patients who present who have chest pain, who because of the narrowing in the arteries of the heart, but very importantly, That's what we do on urgent basis when patients present.
Right. So this again, really, but the sounds of it is a life-saving thing. I mean, this shows you what's going on, and now you're informed as to what do we need to do. And without that, you're kind of shooting in the dark, right? And you're maybe guessing, you know. And yeah.
Yeah, and standard of care. That's how we practice cardiology. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, the good news is, I guess, that the Alberta government has recently finished the planning part of, going ahead with the next stage of getting Lethbridge a cardiac cath lab. So what is that next step then that we need to take?
Yeah, so the government of Alberta has announced funding towards functional planning for a cath lab, but also for cardiac sciences in general. In order to have a successful cardiac catheterization program, we will need a support of an updated ICU and CCU, coronary care unit, as well as a cardiology ward and other forms of imaging. So this is an all-encompassing program altogether to hopefully help elevate the care that we provide in Southern Alberta.
Oh, for sure. And is that going to be, are they planning on building that within the existing Lethbridge Chinook Regional Hospital here, or is that going to be like a separate brand new facility they're going to build?
So that's not quite settled, but we do have shelf space, and that's part of the feasibility study. Currently, at the Chinook Regional Hospital, the 4L and 5L, the new part of the buildings, are empty. So we'd love to see that used and not sit there empty. We are ready to go. So we're just waiting for the feasibility study to be completed. And then hopefully the government will take the further step in funding it. But in the interim, we have set up the Cardiac Sciences Advisory Cabinet. So with prominent leaders in the community, and have established a relationship with the Chinook Regional Hospital Foundation to fundraise towards this project. And that has been an extremely wonderful and productive project. And our goal is ambitious. We are hoping to raise $30 million by 2027, but
But realistically, I mean, how long do you think it'll be, provided, I guess, that money is raised and so forth, and money coming in from government? I mean, how long would it take to have that new cath lab up and running?
If I had my way, it would be next week. Because every single day that goes by, we potentially lose a life, and that's not acceptable. The sooner the better. I think realistically it will take a couple of years, so 2027 at the earliest, and possibly 2029. But it's really hard to know that until we have done the feasibility study and until we have the full funding in place to build it.
All right. Well, let's pray that good things come in here and quickly, right? You've been advocating for more cardiologists in Southern Alberta. How many do we need?
So we need quite a few. So when I first came here in 2013, I was the first cardiologist.
Yeah, just like one on your own. That's crazy.
On my own with an amazing team who's still with me. But but now we are 6 cardiologists across the zone, which is fantastic. The Canadian Medical Association has put a recommendation out that we should have about 4.1 cardiologists per 100,000 population. Our catchment area is above 300,000. So we think at least 12 would be a good place
and
to
you've
start.
Got 6 now?
We have 6.
Okay.
And in the US, just for your information, there's about 38.6 cardiologists for every 100,000. So that's quite a bit high.
Wow, that's insanely higher. That's like
it is.
wow, that just boggles my mind. So you're saying our standard of care should be about, you're saying, was it 12 per 300,000? And so in the States that would be, wow. I mean, how many times higher? Wow.
Yeah. 4.1 would be the Canadian recommendation. And as I mentioned to you earlier, Paul, there is a correlation between the number of cardiologists and outcomes and access to care. So, but the good news is that we are very aggressively recruiting, and there are at least 2, if not 3 cardiologists that are planning to start practice before the end of the year. So we're very thrilled with that.
Okay, yeah. Oh, wow, we've got a ways to go, though, for sure. Yeah. Any thoughts you have on preventative measures for heart health? I mean that's half the battle, I guess, right? If we had less cases to deal with that way because there was something there to prevent the heart disease from happening, that would be a huge help. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I think prevention is fundamental and foundational to the care. As I mentioned to you, we have a population that has higher risk factor profile, more diabetes, more rate of smoking, higher blood pressures, and it's very important that we address that. That's very close to my heart. I spend my free time, extracurricular activity, kind of writing about that and putting information together because I think it's critical. Nothing can take the place of prevention. Of course, intervention and treatment is life-saving, but like you already mentioned, Paul, we need to take it a step back and start where the problem begins, which is prevention.
Yeah, a lot of that, again, dealing with our diet and with exercise and so forth, and just healthy living, right? I know you've written a book on that as well. So, well, we are running out of time, but I want to say a big thank you to you and your team working with you for all the efforts you put in to save lives here in Southern Alberta. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul, for covering this.
Oh, you bet. Dr. Saye Zielke, she's the Medical Director of Chinook Cardiology in Lethbridge. I'm Paul Arthur. Thanks so much on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News for watching.